I think there's a part of communication that doesn't get talked about a lot, but is just how long it takes to improve. You know what I mean? Like how many times you have to get out there, how many times you have to get up in front of your family or that, that team that you work on, or that group of people, how many times you have to communicate for those skills to improve. And so I think that there's a big part of communication that just comes down to continuing to look for those opportunities.
Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling podcast, the 2025.
That's a big
Years
one.
just keep rolling on along. I hope everybody had an incredible holiday season. Did you get what you wanted for Christmas?
I did.
Did you? What'd you get?
I got more than what I wanted.
Did you? You got a baby.
I did. That I did. Yes. Very excited.
So it's going to be an interesting year. You look quite rested for somebody who just had a child a month ago.
Yeah. Sleeps through the night. Hasn't ever cried. It's been fantastic.
It's amazing. Anyways, we are glad you guys are here, and we do hope you had an incredible holiday season. We've seen God do some incredible things here at Potential Church, and you can go back if you'd like to go to the Potential Church handle and website and all that, and you can see some of the different videos that we did and some of the people we helped and some of the impact that we made. And we'd love for you to be a part of our community, because our heart is to connect, is to do life together, it's to reach our potential, just like the book says right there.
Yes.
We want to reach our potential. So hey, leave a comment, share if you haven't already. What better way to start off 2025 than to subscribe and let somebody else know that we're on all the podcast streaming. I mean, all the different apps, websites. We're everywhere.
Everywhere at one time.
Everywhere at one time. And I was thinking, now what can we talk about? What do we need to talk about? Because our heart is to connect so that we can reach our potential. And I was thinking, probably there's nothing more important going into this new year than communicating. Mm-hmm. The ability to hear and be heard. And, Erwin McManus wrote a book called The 7 Frequencies. And he talked about in the book how we all have different frequencies. In other words, we all speak in different ways. And I thought, good book, interesting. And then there's shadow. So there's the positive and the negative. And I was looking through some of the notes that I've got from years gone by, because now in just 2 months, I'll be 58 years old. 58 years old. It's crazy. But anyways, I thought we might talk through some of these. So, and kind of the strengths and the weaknesses when it comes to finding your voice. Because I think embracing what you do well, right, and knowing the weaknesses that you have that come along with it. And so I'm going to name these, and then you tell me which one you think you are.
Okay.
All right. And I don't have 7 like Erwin does, but
okay.
So he's I encourage you to pick up his book. It's a great book. It's just, it's a smaller book, so it's an easy read, but it's got some great content. So the first one is the teacher. All right. And the strength of the teacher is content. You know what I mean? The teachers, they got all the books and all the content, but the weakness, what do you think the weakness of a teacher would be?
No one has any clue what they're talking about.
Kind of connection, right? Sometimes teachers are so caught up in what they're saying, they don't think about whether or not anybody's actually hearing what they're saying.
Right. It's like the whiteboard syndrome, where you're looking more at what you're writing down than you are the people who are listening.
Yeah. You got to have content, but you also have to connect, which leads me to the motivator. All right. And the motivator has the strength of connection. So they immediately connect. Their weakness is just the opposite. It's content. Sometimes motivators don't prepare. Sometimes motivators just get up and like, go, and they connect. And people like to be encouraged and inspired, but at the same time, it's like, well, give me something.
Yeah. Speaking of which, my very first time I went up to teach by myself. I played a Michael Phelps commercial where he was like working out, getting ready for the Olympics again. And it ended, and I had a bunch of notes on what I was going to say, but I just kind of lost it all. And I was just, do life like him. Let me pray for us, Lord.
Well, you never know. That might have been your best teaching
It might have
ever.
motivated someone.
The other one is the storyteller. And the strength of the storytell is engaging, again, the audience, right? Connection in that sense. When you read the scripture, Jesus was a great storyteller.
Yeah.
The weakness of a storyteller sometimes can be, well, where are we going? Some preachers will tell good stories, but they have no real meaning.
Yeah.
And then they try to make a meaning out of it. And you're like, I don't think that story.
Especially youth pastors. Like you can definitely find some youth pastors where the kids know all the stories from their life. But when you ask them, well, what was the point? No clue.
Yeah. That's the hard part, is making sure that the connection to the story, is powerful. And of course, if you read the New Testament, Jesus was, the Good Samaritan. It's just a great story, and you remember the story, but you remember the reason behind the story, right? Then there's the visionary, and the visionary strength of the visionary is purpose, right? But their weakness is how. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of visionaries are like, we're going to go change the world, we're going to go build this company, or we're going to start this church. And somebody's like, yeah, but where are we going to get the money? And they're like, God will provide.
Yeah. You hear a lot about this during like election time with people talking about what they're going to do. And then the question always comes up, so how are we doing that?
Right.
It's like, well, you'll see. You'll see.
Yes, it's going to be the best ever. That's the Trump voice. It's the best ever. But yeah, so of those, and like I said, we could talk about more, but do any of these connect with you? The teacher, the motivator, the storyteller, or the visionary?
Man, that's a tough one. Definitely not the teacher. That's not my calling. That's not where I fall. Between the motivator, the storyteller, and the visionary, if I had to pick one, I would say storytelling is what I enjoy the most. Yeah. If I had to pick one, I don't know if it's like most natural necessarily, but it's the one I enjoy the most.
And, again, you kind of, as a communicator, you want to connect them all together.
Right.
And it's figuring out, what you do well and inviting people into your life so that you can, get some positive feedback. Then that's always difficult, right? I mean, everybody likes to hear it. How'd I do? You did great. But you want folks who can say, well, you mispronounced this word, or
right.
Have you thought about adding this or taking this away? I think is always, valuable as a communicator. And the more confident you are in your communication, the easier it is always to give feedback.
Yeah.
It's funny, they say that, public speaking is one of the things that people get freaked out about. And yet it plays such a big role in whether you're able to succeed or not.
Yeah.
As we go into this new year, whether you're a teacher or a preacher or a business person or just trying to get a date, it's
right.
like, can you communicate?
Exactly. That's, I think, the biggest thing. It's interesting because in youth where, I lead out, there's opportunity for a lot of people to learn how to communicate from the platform. And what I will often tell people is that the benefits, this may not be your career, communicating from the platform, but the benefits that come with it are you're just able to communicate in groups far more effectively. You know what I mean? You get a team of people and you're getting ready to go on a missions trip, or you've got, 3 people in your living room that you're starting a business with. You're able to communicate to them, get them excited, get them passionate far more effectively when you've done that on a stage in front of, X amount of people.
And, one of the keys, I think, is to be authentic. Mm-hmm. There's always that temptation when you are, communicating, I know what you want to hear. And to say, like you were saying earlier, politicians kind of fall into this a lot. They know what people want to hear. And so they're tempted to say what they want to hear
Right.
instead of what maybe they should be, the truth, I guess.
Right. Absolutely.
Same thing can be happening in family relationships and, in all areas really where you communicate, not as authentic.
Right. Well, there's a delicate balance that I think you have to hit when you're communicating. You need emotion to be brought out in people, because otherwise what you're saying, they can't just hear it. They've got to feel it in some way, right? Even the teacher format, they still have to feel it for it to be effective. I remember, I'm sure everyone can think of the teachers they've had that weren't just saying words. They were,
right.
They felt it, they meant it, and it brought out this emotion in you. But sometimes you can play off emotion too much, where you're always going for the heightened emotions. You're going for tears. You're going for, this just heart-wrenching moment. But it's always the same. It's not necessarily growing the person. They're not getting better. They're not going further. It's always that same kind of message that doesn't really progress their life. And so I think there's a delicate balance. You need the emotion, but you're not trying to always just play off emotion, because like you said, sometimes the truth is not emotional. It's just not fun to hear. You know what I mean? And I think that's, it takes so much confidence to get on stage and speak, and produces so much confidence because that insecurity comes out. You know what I mean? When you get up and speak and not even just on stage, but you're talking in front of a group, and when people are with you, they're nodding their heads, they're agreeing. That feels good. But when you get up and talk about how, hey, we're not going to be able to take, this day off of work because of X, you're not getting the head nods and agreements. And so, but it's still needed.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's, always good to challenge yourself as a communicator to not just give the messages that everyone wants to hear, but like you said, to be honest and give those messages that people don't want to hear, that they're not excited about. But can you get them to rally behind and understand it?
And just being authentic, business people, a lot of times, how many sales did you make, or preachers? How big is your church? And, or what do you do? Like, what's your personal growth plan? And, if you're not careful, you're given a plan that, maybe at one time you got up at 4:00, but you heard The Rock got up at 4. So you talk about all this stuff that's just not real.
Right.
And I think, and then before you realize it, you're doing that more than you're not, just making up stuff. Yeah. And it's not really what you are doing or what you're experiencing. And so over time, you become a less effective communicator.
Absolutely.
And all right, so the other thing I wrote down here as I was thinking back is the difference between, and I read a book. Oh, it's an old book. I can't, maybe the author's name will come to me, but he talked about the difference between a speaker and a communicator.
Uh-huh.
And we've all heard speakers and we've all heard communicators. All right. It reminded me of a story, a little preacher story, right? Uh-huh. This preacher was standing, he's just, he's a young preacher and he's kind of nervous, and he's talking about the book of Revelation where it talks about Jesus coming. And so, he steps back, kind of gets himself ready, and he goes up and he says, "And I'm coming." And he forgot what he's going to say. So he stepped back and kind of collected his thoughts, and he steps up and says, "I'm coming." And he steps back, okay, let me get my thoughts together, gets his scripture together and everything. And then he steps up again and he says, "I'm coming." And when he hits the podium, it rolls over and he falls off the stage and he falls into the lap of this older person that's at church there. And he's like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen." And she's like, "Oh, that's okay, Sonny. You told me 3 times you were coming and I never got out of the way." So, anyways, that's my speaker and communicator. Some of us feel like that. You know what I mean? You feel like you fall off the stage and what you're trying to do is not what happens.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me what you think. A speaker takes something simple and makes it complicated.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And a communicator takes something complicated and makes it simple.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times it's because of pride, and you know what I mean? We want to sound smart. And I don't know about, the folks who are listening today, what area that they're involved in, what business or whatever. I know in ministry, there's a certain way in which to communicate so that the people assume you're an academic, that you're, the
Right.
And if it's a temptation then to communicate in that way, even if you're not as effective.
Right.
And
Yeah. I remember training someone in youth ministry, and they were getting ready to speak, and it was the first time, and one of their points was dense, let's call it. It was it had a lot of stuff within that one point. And I was kind of letting them know, like, hey, I think that's going to get lost upon, the again, we're talking about middle schoolers and high schoolers. And they said, like, well, how do you know that that's not going to land? And I said, well, because I don't understand what you're trying to say. And I, part of my job is to study scripture.
Right.
Not that I'm an expert.
Right.
But I can tell you, if I don't get it, there's no way a 12-year-old's going to understand. But I do think there's a certain aspect that we have to remind ourselves of who the audience is. Sometimes we can speak, to an audience of 2, but there's 100 people listening. And it's like, man, we just missed majority of the people because we wanted this 1 or 2 people to think we were smart or to think we knew something, more than what we feel we do. And I've definitely been guilty of that. You know what I mean? Where, you're talking to a group and there's 1 or 2 people that it's like, man, I want them to hear what I'm saying. And you speak to them, but the other people didn't. You know what I mean? You went too far beyond. You made it too complicated. You made it too specific even. You know what I mean? I think sometimes that speakers can make things too specific where it's like, you've narrowed it down so much that you're not talking to me any longer. If you left it a little more broad, I would be with you, but you've, narrowed it down so much that I'm lost in this.
Yeah, I listening to different like podcasters and all the different programs that are online and everything. And sometimes somebody will get frustrated, and they'll talk to their staff through their podcast. And, that's never really effective.
Yeah.
Because the people you want to hear you don't hear you.
Right.
If they would have heard you in the hallway, you know what I mean? Or at the last staff meeting. And the people who are with you overhear you.
Right.
So if I say, man, we're just not working hard, who's going to hear me the loudest are the ones working hard.
Yeah.
The ones not working hard, unless I speak directly to them, are not going to hear me.
Yeah.
And
you're talking to someone else.
yeah, exactly. And I think another thing we can do, especially when we think about podcasts and all these kind of things, is, a lot of times you get frustrated. A lot of times you feel like people are taking advantage of you. It's not fair, all those kind of things. And if you start to communicate that, again, what I've learned, even from the pulpit or the platform or let alone on any kind of podcast, is really people don't care. Right. And by that, I don't mean in a mean way, but I just think if you start talking about how you're struggling financially, right? Well, somebody's going to look at your life and say, well, yeah, it's struggling financially. They ought to walk in my shoes. Or we so quickly nowadays, you think you're a victim. I'm much more of a victim. You think your day was tough. My day's a lot worse. You think you're paying a lot of alimony. You ought to know what I'm paying, right? And I think as a communicator, that's important because, a lot of times you want to communicate that you're struggling or that you're going, and so it's like, how do I communicate that in a way where people hear what I'm saying and what I'm asking them to do, as opposed to immediately comparing themselves to me? Mm-hmm. And I think that happens today even more than it used to. I think a lot of times communicators don't realize that. I hear a lot of podcasters talk about the difficulties, it's burning out or having to put out a message every day or losing followers or the algorithm has changed. And I'm not saying nobody hears that, but I'm saying the vast majority of people, in my experience, we're so focused upon ourselves that I can't hear effectively what your challenges are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. So you have to really think through how to communicate that. Number 2, a speaker is focused on himself, like we're talking about, and a communicator is focused on the audience. And that's so natural to focus on yourself. Are people going to laugh? How do I look? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And as opposed to really thinking about the audience themselves. What kind of mood are they coming in? What are they feeling? What's just happened? Last year I was on Daystar the day after the election. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's fair to say that the folks at Daystar were, very excited about
glass half full.
Yes. They were, it was full. They were very excited about Trump winning. Had he lost, it would have been a different environment and their audience. Right. And so that's important to think through, so that you can match the energy of the audience, or you can at least start where they are and then try to take them to a different place.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it, but a lot of times when I'm communicating and you start trying to find where the people are, are they sad? Are they mad? Are they tired? Are they not with you at all? And you got to pull them back in, and a lot of times that will make a speech or teaching time longer than if they're actually with you, because you're trying to find them and then take them on a journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's sometimes I find that you can even overanalyze the crowd. Sometimes you can be so into what's the crowd feeling that you don't say what you need to say, because the moment feels like they check out. It's like, sometimes you do have to operate in, man, this may just be for the one person out there. Right. I'm not saying that's what anytime you're thinking about what you're going to communicate, you're just thinking about one person. But, sometimes it, like we've said, it's not the most fun thing to hear. And so, I think that there's an aspect that you want to know where the crowd's at, especially, this is getting very practical, if you're going to use humor. I think if you're going to use humor, which you don't have to, but if you're going to, anytime you communicate, whether it's in front of your family, a team, or from a platform, if you're going to use humor, you got to know where the crowd's at. Because I'm sure we've both seen the communicators who tell a joke or tell a story and the crowd lost it 5 minutes ago, but they're going to finish this. They're going to see it through till the end. And so I definitely think, if you're going to use humor or storytelling, you got to follow, where's the crowd at? Are they with me? Have I already lost them?
That's why I don't tell a lot of jokes. I will tell stories, because I think you can tell a story. And if you mean for it to be funny, you can tell a story. If people laugh, great. But if they don't, you can just kind of keep moving.
It still ties into what you're talking about.
And where a joke is, there's an expectation that people are going to laugh. And if they don't laugh, then there's that uneasy moment. What do you do? Do you say, well, that was supposed to be funny, or I thought that was a joke, or, what's wrong with you people, or, nobody's listening. Are you out there? All those kind of things. Trying to figure out exactly how do you respond when a joke, where a story's a lot easier because you can just keep moving.
More natural laughs as well, I think.
Yeah. But it's interesting just thinking through, like Joel, I don't know I'm sure the folks have heard Joel on TV. He tells a lot of funny old preacher stories.
Yeah.
But again, it matches his personality and it comes across very sincere.
Yeah.
And people love it when he does.
Yeah.
A speaker is information-oriented, a communicator is people-oriented. A speaker tends to speak to the mind only, where a communicator speaks to the mind and the heart. Because you always have folks out there that are mind people and folks out there that are heart people. And like we were talking earlier, I think one of the failures that we can do as a communicator, especially if it's a public communicator, or a teacher or a speech giver or a pastor or something to that effect, there are those times when you don't feel like you feel like you're talking to that wall. But if you're focused on being faithful to the people that you're teaching, you're going to push through that, right?
Yeah.
You may not be giving me the response that I want, but I'm going to give you the best that I can.
Yeah.
And because I'm focused on you, where if I just do what I want to do, it's like, all right, thanks for being here, because it's like, if you don't want to be here, why do I want to be here? But being audience sensitive and being aware of that as a communicator, as opposed to just a speaker, and you're going to continue to do your best. You're not going to just read it. You know what I mean? You're not going to just give the content, but you're going to still continue to try to communicate to the people.
Absolutely. I think there's a part of communication that doesn't get talked about a lot, but is just how long it takes to improve. You know what I mean? Like how many times you have to get out there, how many times you have to get up in front of your family or that, that team that you work on, or that group of people, how many times you have to communicate for those skills to improve. I often tell people when they start, like, just stick with just any opportunity that comes up to speak in front of people. Doesn't have to be from a stage, but to speak in front of people. If it's an opportunity to pray at the end, for dinner, whatever it may be, take it every time, because that's continuing to improve your ability to speak, because there's just this nerves aspect, right? That I remember watching videos of speakers and I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. This is the weekend. I'm going to talk. And it just never sounded like that, because there's an aspect of just getting comfortable in front of people.
Right.
And so I think that there's a big part of communication that just comes down to continuing to look for those opportunities. And, I think about how even like just being your son, I know that your communication from the platform helped you communicate to me, Tyler, and Bailey more effectively. It helped you, there were times where you would talk to us that it was very clear, it was concise, it made a lot of sense, that I know you may have not had that ability had you have not taken all those opportunities to speak in front of people. And so I think that it's not just about getting on stage and speaking, because I think a lot of people, well, that's just not my thing. They push it out. But it's about every moment, just being able to communicate better when you're in a argument with your spouse, being able to more effectively communicate. If you can read her emotions or his emotions and feelings, and you're able to really break down what you're saying in a very simple way, that's going to help in every area, not just getting on stage and speaking, but in your everyday arguments, disagreements, when you're hanging out with your buddies, all that kind of stuff, it's going to impact. And so just looking for those opportunities and taking them every time they come up, and knowing there are going to be moments where you completely flop. I remember getting up on stage one time to speak, and my iPad died before I started. It was during the video, and I couldn't. I mean, that was such a miserable teaching, but that taught me something. You know what I mean? In that process, I learned
to charge your iPad.
To charge my iPad. But it got me confident in there are going to be moments, while you always want to prepare, there are going to be moments where you couldn't prepare. You know what I mean? Your kid comes home and they did something or said something, and now you don't have time to prepare. We're here, and now I got to communicate. And so I think all of those moments just help you get a little bit better.
Yeah, no, that's true. And the other thing I was thinking is that a lot of times one of the things that's most challenging for people to learn when it comes to communicating is the purpose of what you're saying. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there are good teachers, and then there are folks who move people from point A to point B. Yeah. And even in announcements, a lot of times that's the most difficult thing to get. It's like, don't just give information. Even if everybody laughs, if nobody signs up for what you're saying, if nobody is challenged to participate, then you're really failing. Right. No matter how much good times people had, or they laughed, or even if they learned something, if you didn't move them from point A to point B, I think you failed as a communicator.
Absolutely. If you think about it, if you're hiring someone, that role may not ever include public speaking. But if that person, they're always going to be able to get the team on board. I mean, you're taking them, they've just become so much more valuable. And so I think for anyone listening, that ability is just so incredibly helpful to be able to move, like you said, move people from point A to point B. And it doesn't have to be the funniest person in the room. There's a lot of people who crack all the jokes, but they can never get people to actually move.
Right.
And so you don't have to be the funniest. You don't have to be the smartest or even the most outgoing. You just have to learn, as you kind of laid out the different forms of communication, you have to learn what you are and how to use that to move people. But there's no way to know what you are unless you get out there and speak in some format. Exactly.
Well, let us know in the comments below, what are some of the things that you've learned along the way when it comes to communicating, or some of the obstacles. And maybe we'll do a follow-up podcast where we talk about the different obstacles, the stage, the microphone, the temperature, the size of the crowd, all those things are important when it comes to communicating, even if it's just your family or your spouse. But let us know in the comments below. I am so thankful to be able to start the new year with you. And if there's any skill I think that will help you succeed this year, it is the skill of communication. And listening is a big part. Hearing what others are saying is a big part of that. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to pick up a copy of the book if you haven't done that. And we're just days away or weeks away from our 100th episode.
Come on.
That's a lot of episodes.
That it is.
A lot of energy, a lot of episodes you can go back and listen to and become a more effective leader, become more effective at reaching your potential. This is new for us, and we've been trying to figure it out along the way. I hope we've been helpful. I hope we've been encouraging. And don't forget, we have Sunday Night Live. We live stream. We have a live stream every Sunday night. And we're getting ready to kick off the new year on that as well. Season 2.
Oh.
But we have a lot of fun. Again, we want you to succeed. I believe that you were created on purpose to do something of significance. And anything that we can do to help you accomplish that, we're in it. God bless. You have an incredible day. And we'll see you next time right here on the Troy Gramling Podcast. Happy New Year.